Hey, happy Friday. Welcome to your Maxillary Friday in your Maxillary Week. I'm Dr. Myrdalis Diaz Ramirez, creator of the Maxillary Mastermind, which is a personal and professional development program for physicians who want to retake control of their lives, and we teach them entrepreneurship to do that. And we also have the podcast called Design Your Physician Life, and this week we had an amazing guest. Her name is Dr. Rachel Draelos, and we're hoping that she join us here shortly. We're very excited to have her. This is a very important era. It's the era where generative AI made it. She's here. Awesome. So she's going to join us. Let's see. I'm going to approve you coming in. Sending you the invite. So come in. We have so much to talk about today because it's a topic that really affects us. And, in healthcare, we tend to do a little bit later the things, and we really have to be ready for this time. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited that you're here with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
So thank you for being on our podcast earlier this week. If I invite whoever hasn't seen the episode to go ahead and watch it, because it was really an eye-opening with somebody who has such a great background. We're gonna, before we dig into the things, I do want to invite whoever watches us to do #live and #replay, and then that they share and they go to our podcast. Let's give just a little bit of background because I want them to go to and see the podcast, listen to the podcast, which is now on YouTube also, and this live will also be hosted on YouTube. So you are a physician with special training, special skills. We don't know many of you, and I'm so excited that I've met you. So tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm Rachel. I was the first person to get both a medical degree and a PhD in computer science from Duke. My PhD focused on artificial intelligence and specifically machine learning method development for medical data. And since graduating, I've been working as the founder and CEO of CyDoc, which is a health tech startup.
That's incredible. And I remember, we talk about the era. When I was in college, it was a time when we had email for the first time, and it was just all so exciting. And then since then, we've seen all these other advancements in technology, going from having the facility of having all these computers, having wireless devices, and then things going into your pocket, and then having so many tools right there, at your hand, in your hands. And now going from there to the internet, and then having generative AI available so quickly, and then all these things available so easily, which we didn't have before. And when you went to training, medical school, and you decided, because you really like both, you like medicine and you also like computer science, going to that, now that you've seen all these changes, how do you feel looking at all these things, and now knowing that you're so unique as a physician with your training?
I think it's definitely an exciting time. There's so much potential for technology to improve healthcare, and both from a patient's perspective, but also from a physician's perspective. Lots of opportunities where AI can make workflows easier and automate documentation. So I think it's a really exciting time. I also think it's really important for physicians to get really involved, specifically on the healthcare side, because like with any new technology, specifically if we're talking about things like large language models or ChatGPT, there's potential for good ways of using it and not so good ways of using it. And so the more feedback that we have from physicians, the better the technology will be.
And that was one of the topics that we were discussing in our podcast. One of them was, sometimes we just trust technology. It's out there, it came, so it must be okay, it must be tested, it must be good to use. And a lot of these systems really are being released as testing tools that we cannot just trust completely. So tell us a little bit, because I was really amazed, and we didn't necessarily dig into that through the podcast, which if you're joining us right now, the podcast link is really linked. It's right there in the chat, and you can join it later. But tell us a little bit more in detail about the validity and the safety of these tools. How we talked about how many for example, images are needed for something in radiology, but in general, we don't really think when we're getting these tools about the validity and safety of these tools.
Yeah. So I think, agreeing with you, it's a super important topic, and your way of phrasing it, that a lot of these are being released and it's more in kind of a testing stage, is right on. So a lot of, if we're talking about, for example, ChatGPT, for example, that's not something where tons of medical researchers have thoroughly vetted it in medical capacity. They've done some kind of one-off medically related things like giving it USMLE test questions, but that's not the same thing at all as actually practicing medicine, and also doesn't really reveal some of the issues. So there's a couple different issues specifically around large language models. One of them is bias. They're essentially trained on data pulled out of the internet. So any biases that you would see in internet data are present in the model, and that can be a really serious problem. Another issue with them is the hallucination problem. So sometimes they can invent information that's not really true. There was in the news recently some article about this lawyer who was citing fake cases because they came out of ChatGPT and they seemed real, but they were actually just completely made up. So that's another issue. And then just in general, they need a lot more validation. So I think moving forward, the more input we have from doctors, and also the more that in general, the more that the public is asking for further validation, the better the models will become. And I think it's just really important to keep in mind that none of these models are a magic wand, and they all have limitations that really need to be taken seriously when building out technology with them.
And then something that's a little bit scary to me, from our conversation, was that, yes, we trust because, it's something that's put out there, so it looks like usable technology. Let's use this thing, and it's in test. But there's some mechanisms that they put still behind the scenes that we don't see and that we wouldn't necessarily ever see, that have to do with safety per se, of how we are going to be accessing, or that information is going to be getting to us. Can you tell us a little bit about those specific mechanisms that are like safeguards from the machine?
Absolutely. So one example would be there's something called the moderator API, and at least as of the most recent time I was reading about this, everything that you would have, receive or give to ChatGPT goes through the moderator API, and essentially what that does is it hides overtly disturbing generating content. So for example, if you go to ChatGPT and you ask it to produce content that has just bad things in it, like violent content or discriminatory content, the moderator API blocks you from seeing what the model would actually have produced, because the underlying model itself, because it's trained on data from the internet, it can produce all sorts of really terrible things. So there are lots of filtering steps that they've put in place to try and mitigate that, which I think is a good thing. We definitely don't want to be having generative models that are producing terrible things. That's good. But at the same time, the fact that there are these filters in place means that people may not be as aware of the kinds of biases or issues that are within the core model, and those kinds of biases can manifest in other ways. So for example, if you're asking a large language model to perform some kind of rating on people, or if you're in a medical context, and let's say you took a bunch of medical notes and you refined a large language model on them, you should expect that like all the biases that are part of those notes are then in the model, and you just have to take that into account because it may not be something you can catch with these kinds of filters.
So we talked about how this, like you have a company yourself, or using artificial intelligence models to produce, a product, right? A product and service for your clients. And we talked about the involvement of physicians. And one of the things that we just, we're discussing right now is all these safeguards. And when you're a physician, you're in healthcare, we're not going to necessarily see like a huge team of physicians in ChatGPT helping them, to manage and put these safeguards in place, right? We might see a few, we might, I don't know, because I haven't checked how many people are working who are actual physicians with ChatGPT to then work in the healthcare aspect. But that's one of the ways that physicians can help. So tell us where you see the most pressing need for physicians to be involved in the development or practice of or use of artificial intelligence, and how can they get involved?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So I would say actually both across industry and academia, there's a real need for having more physicians involved. On the industry side, I think it obviously depends on the size of the company, but there's never anything wrong with just directly reaching out to whoever it is within the company that's working on the AI and saying, hey, I'm a physician, I'm interested in getting involved in this, how can I help? A lot of times, especially if a company is very oriented towards engineers, they really welcome having physician input, and sometimes it can be hard for people on the engineering side to find physicians who are interested in participating in AI development. So I would encourage you to just directly reach out anyone in industry who's part of either some subcomponent of a big company, or maybe they're in a startup. Just directly contacting them over LinkedIn, or if they have their email available, that's a good way to get started. And then on the academic side, similarly, I've met with a lot of different people working in computer science departments or electrical engineering departments, and they really want to build something that's medically meaningful, but finding a doctor who can participate in that can be difficult. So also just directly reaching out to people who are doing research in academia on medical AI can be really productive, because a lot of times the response you'll get is, oh yes, please, can I talk to you?
You know, that's incredible, because we as physicians, we might say, oh, I'm just a physician, right? I don't know much about this computer science. And then on the other side, they might say, oh, I'm just an engineer, I don't know much about medicine. But the truth is that these systems that are going to affect healthcare will require the collaboration of both parts, and both parts are eager to work with the other. And this imitation of like, I'm just this or I'm just that, like, it doesn't work. Like, we have to really move on quickly, because talking about moving things quickly, if we, from the time that we recorded our podcast to the time that it was released this week, things have changed tremendously in the way that, the tools that we're having. So things are moving really pretty fast. And the speed in medicine is usually not that fast, right? We are slow to get into buy into things, because we're people who really, for the most part, need like a lot of data to be able to institute a treatment for somebody. So we're used in many ways to do that. But in this case, I believe that the way that generative AI has come to be is in such a way that it's putting at risk a lot of positions, including the risk of doctors' positions. So we really have to be involved and embrace and see how we are going to do that. So do you see what limitations, besides anything that we've mentioned so far, physicians might have in order to get involved with AI in some way, shape, or form? Or do you think, you know what, there's no excuse, let's just go for it?
On both sides, the limitation is mostly just being out of one's comfort zone. So, on the medical side, if you haven't been involved with AI before, that could be something that's outside your comfort zone. So it might feel kind of strange at first, but rest assured, it goes both ways. So a lot of times engineers feel really out of their comfort zone when they're trying to talk to doctors. And just, for some context, it would be not unusual that you might have someone on the engineering side who's working on a project related to chest x-rays, and when they look at a chest x-ray, they don't really know like what is in it. They don't know like what the lungs are or what the heart is or any of that, or like what kinds of conditions one might be able to see in a chest x-ray. Or if you have someone who's working on natural language processing and they're working on medical notes, they may not know what is the purpose of a medical note, what is the structure of a medical note. So just really foundational things that a physician can add huge value by explaining, this is what a chest x-ray is, this is what a medical note is, or even things like, this is what a workflow is. So if you're trying to build an AI model to solve this problem, does that actually even make sense? Like I remember seeing a paper once where people were trying to predict a patient's age from a CT scan. And, if you're a physician, you're thinking, well, that's hilarious. Like, why don't you just look at their age in the medical record? So this is where it's just really, I think, you should just feel very able and empowered to just reach out to people from the AI side, because they definitely need physician input, and you can add so much value to a project.
So let's talk about tools that we have available, right? imagine that there's a physician's office and the flow, the workflow, and I want to get to the tool that you're creating for physicians as well. Where do you think physicians can begin to start using AI today in their workflow in their physician offices, and understanding that we can have problems with the data that we're getting back, with the results that we're getting back, depending on the data that is being put in. So where do you see in the workflow of a physician's office us using AI today?
Yeah, so I think when it comes down to your practical level of your day-to-day experience, to some extent, whether you can use AI depends on whether you can buy AI products directly for your practice, if it's a private practice, or whether if you're in a hospital system, if the hospital system has purchased AI for use by the hospital system. Generally, if you're in a hospital system, they have all the restrictions around what kind of software individual people can use, so it can make it a little bit trickier. But in any case, in terms of different types of AI that are out there, one type of AI is on the patient intake side, and that's what I'm working on at CyDoc. So we have a AI-powered patient intake form that can interview a patient based on why they're coming in. For example, a patient coming in with diabetes, they'll have this form that gets generated by AI to interview them, asking them about if they do home blood glucose monitoring and things like that. Or if they're coming in for new headaches, it'll have questions about how severe the headaches are and when they come on, stuff like that. And then it will generate a draft medical note so that before the visit even starts, you have a draft note that can help the visit go more smoothly and spending less time on documentation. So that's one AI application that I've been working on through CyDoc. Another exciting area for AI is on the billing side. There's a lot of interest in having more automated billing based on consuming information that was aggregated during the visit and using that to generate codes. There's also a lot of interest in AI that is sort of ambient listening AI. So software like Dragon basically flipped to being used during an appointment and then